the state was created, you were 18 years old. By 2016, you will be 60 and above, and so able to remember how the parks were and the conditions of the parks over time. So the study also applied 15% from the census to the respondents. So we have 60 respondents, which forms 16% of 400 to be 60 years and above, and the rest under 60 years. To get the 60 years, we selectively chose people living in park neighborhoods. Now, park neighborhoods have been defined by studies by Obatero as 2-kilometer radius around parks. Those are park threshold areas, which studies show contain the major users of parks. So within these threshold areas, the study used people aged above 60 living within this area. The criteria for participation is that you're above 60 years old, you have lived within this time period in the neighborhood, and so have used and understood the conditions of the parks over time. How were these respondents chosen? They were chosen using the snowball approach. The snowball approach is a non-probability statistic method that makes use of one person. Once you get a 160-year-old, he gets another, and it snowballs until you get the total figure for your study. The rest of the respondents who are aged less than 60 years old were purposely randomly chosen. How was this done? The study was carried out over a 7-day period, and within that 7 days we had time epochs of 8 a.m. to 12 noon, 12 noon to 4 p.m., and 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. Within this time epoch, every 5th park user was identified for use. Now, all these data were put together, and the statistical tool of ANOVA, which is analysis of variance, was used to see if there is a variation over time in how parks have been used and perceived and the conditions of such parks. Also, descriptive statistics were used. The next slide, please. The findings of this study. Now, studies have also shown that demographics, personal traits of gender and of age are important in the use of parks. So the study found out over time there had been no change in the male-female ratio of use of parks. Over time, the study found out that more males use parks than females. You could argue that this is a culture that is male-dominated, but that ratio is very important in park studies because the male-female ratio shows whether a park is sustainably used or not. If more males are using, the ratio between male and female use is high, then that means that the park is not being maximally used. Then average age. The study also found out that there is a variation over time. Now we have younger people using parks. That is a good sign, and yet it's still a bad sign because perception of insecurity is affected by the use of younger people, more younger people using parks. Also, the study found that in Makurdi there are about 7 parks, all located within the older core of the city. Now, if you look at this map, though it's not very clear, if you look at this map, the bigger circle shows the 16-kilometer radius of Makurdi. The smaller circle shows the 10-kilometer radius of Makurdi local government area. Now, the red circles show the park locations and the threshold areas. If you can look at the map very well, those red circles are concentrated in just one part of town. This means that as the city has grown over time, the rate of park growth has not grown. You have parks located only in the older core part of the city. The outgrown parts of the town have no parks. Second slide. Next slide, please. Okay. The condition of public parks. Now, the pluses show where we used several variables to assess the condition of park. They include the provision of food and drinks, artistic features, landscaping, whether there were children play areas in the parks or not, the features of local identity, buildings and huts, trails and paths, and then green grass. The pluses show areas where there has been growth. There have been change in the conditions over time. That is, when you talk of food and drinks, the blue colors show the respondents who are aged above 60, and then the pink colors show the respondents who are aged less than 60. Now, when you see a bar that is large in the blue section, and you also see a corresponding large one in the red section, it shows that the condition of that particular variable has been perceived by the respondents and the people aged above 60 as good, and people less than 60 as good. So the pluses show that some of the conditions have remained constant over time, not good or fair, and some have improved over time. Where there are pluses, it shows that over time there has been constant improvement in terms of provision of food and drinks. That means the condition of parks in Makurdi show that food and drinks have always been seen as good, provided good, artistic features are good, and then trails and paths are good. The next slide, please. Testing the variation in the condition of parks over time used ANOVA, like I said earlier. This is a statistical tool that made use of having all the mean scores of all the variables put together and standard deviations, and then placing them side by side for the two classes of cohorts, age cohorts of above 60 and below 60. The study found that there was no significant variation in the mean scores for both current users and respondents age over 60. This means that the variation in the condition of parks in Makurdi is not significant within the study period. That is, the conditions in parks has not improved significantly over the study period. Next slide, please. Now, changing perception, the second objective, the main objective was to find the changing perception of parks. Also, we used several variables to assess the perception of two key perceptions that are important in the use of public space that have been found in literature. The perception of insecurity and the perception of quality have been found to be very important in the use of public spaces. And finding from the study, we used variables such as illumination of parks in the night, heavy traffic around the parks, abandoned buildings within the park premises, presence of threatening people, such as younger people, people that are peddling drugs, prior knowledge of crime within the park and around the park, social misfits like prostitutes hanging around the parks as indicators for perception of insecurity. And we use variables such as presence of shade trees, good sitting arrangements, presence of toilets, presence of public water supply, presence of electricity, presence of park attendants, presence of safety equipment like fire hydrants and all that, the overall appearance of the park, the presence of graffiti on walls, presence of vandalism, litter, and excessive noise as quality indicators for park use. Now, the findings found that there were variations during the research period in the perception of insecurity and quality within the parks. Next slide. Perception of insecurity. Feelings of insecurity of parks have been sustained from 1976 to 2018 in most of the indices measuring perception of quality. This, again, is quality is very poor, but in terms of presence of social miscreants, the first bars show the older, all the others. You can see the bar, even though it's not very clear. The next slide, please. Perception of quality using all the indicators I said earlier shows that out of 12 quality indicators, 2 have been constantly viewed as acceptable, that is good, which is green grass and perception of sitting arrangements and shade trees, have been viewed as good quality indicators in parks. All the others have been negatively viewed as not good and unacceptable over time. Next slide, please. In summary, the condition of spatial elements in parks has remained constant, showing no improvement over time. The study revealed that insecurity and low quality are important perceptions found to be prevalent in the study area. Of course, when you once you perceive a park as insecure and the quality as low, of course you can forecast and say how the use of parks have been over time. The use of parks have not been as it should be because the people, respondents, perceive them as insecure and of low quality. As such, the study recommends that schemes to improve parks should include creative ways of making public spaces attractive and reduce aspects of insecurity that make people shun public spaces, such as illumination at night, such as reduction of people viewed to be threatening around parks and so on. And also, by emphasizing physical features like improved illumination of parks at night, eviction of social miscreants around parks, inclusion of quality elements such as park attendants, first aid apparatus will do a lot to improve the use of parks. Thank you very much for your time. Next slide.
We can do better, please. Can we give her a round of applause? Thank you for your paper. We want to take the next paper, exploring the elements of defensible space theory for enhanced security in the design of mass settlement in the Northeast. We call on architect Khalifa Rabiu to come up and deliver his paper. Can we clap for him, please?
All protocols duly observed. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The topic of discussion today is exploring the elements of defensible space theory for enhanced security in the design of mass housing settlements in northeastern Nigeria. Next slide. The recent situation in the country is that of insecurity. Terror attacks and the economic downfall has led to a significant rise in crime. We have cases of theft, burglary, kidnap, rape, etc. happening especially in the northeastern part of the country, which has been subject to attacks from a popular terrorist group known as Boko Haram. The defensible space theory by architect Oscar Newman is one of the efforts to reduce crime rate in the environment through design. The defensible space theory relies on self-help rather than government intervention and security agencies. This theory focuses on pre-construction, from planning to post-construction, and it requires a deep understanding of the user population. See, today, the society debates the role that architecture should play when it comes to security. It is my belief that as professionals in the building industry, as leaders in the building industry, architects have a huge role to play in security in buildings. Usually nowadays, security comes as an afterthought. After designing the building, when users start, then you now install security cameras left and right in the building in a bid to minimize crime. However, our focus should be passive means of security, minimizing it through design. Defensive architecture today is sometimes designed to function like a fortress, you know, retrofitted with that same wall that you built of about 4.5 meters to keep the burglars out or the armed robbers is the same wall that will keep you in. This study explores the elements of the residential defensible space using standard criteria and analyzes the possible crime vulnerabilities and produces a framework for design solutions which are integrated into the socio-cultural preferences of residents in the study area. What it basically means is a combination of the defensible space theory with socio-cultural demographic influences. So the study area that was chosen is in the northeastern region of Nigeria, Borno State, due to its increased crime rate in recent times, especially in residential areas. Next slide. The concept of the defensible space theory is simple. It is to restructure the physical layout of communities to allow the residents to have greater control over the areas surrounding their homes. This includes the streets and the grounds outside their buildings, and even the lobbies and corridors within them. It gives the residents a sense of ownership, which increases their natural instinct and tendency to protect their spaces. When a resident feels that a space actually belongs to him, he feels a greater need to protect that particular space. The elements of defensible space theory are territoriality, image and milieu, and natural surveillance. Territoriality is defined as the capacity of the physical environment to create perceived zones of territorial influence. That was said by Oscar Newman in 1972. A clear delineation between public and semi-private spaces. These zones are created through the use of barriers, some real and some symbolic, that disrupt movement between the public and private spaces. Image and milieu. What defensible space theory tries to portray by helping you become your neighbor's keeper and by helping your neighbor become your keeper. Excuse me, next slide. So this is just a brief definition of terms. A house can be described as structures and spaces constructed to provide shelter for human habitation while adequately containing daily household activities. The cultural heritage of northern Nigeria, since we're trying to infuse both the defensible space theory principles and demography, specifically the heritage. Northern Nigeria, even though is ethnically and religiously diverse region, is an overwhelming majority a Muslim region. So the term Hausa usually refers, in northern Nigeria, usually refers to, when you say somebody is Hausa, people naturally think that person is Muslim. So cultural and religious demography seem to be very intertwined in northern Nigeria, especially in places like the northeast. The Hausa traditional home, the religious and cultural significances regarding visual privacy in the two regions of the northeast and northwest have tended to produce inward-looking plans and external walls that have no openings to allow outsiders to look at the family members. The average Hausa man wants to hide the family from the rest of the world. That means when you gain access into the Hausa family, the Hausa man's living space, the living spaces are on the exterior, while the bedrooms are on the interior of the floor plans. So the methodology, we adopted similar studies conducted in Oscar Newman's theory and adopted his research approach, thereby giving more credibility to the case study. We used a checklist by CPTED, that is Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design, to rate this. In the checklist, sorry, next slide. In the checklist, we further broke down territoriality into signage, exterior entrances, fencing, landscaping, natural surveillance into the site, the building layout, mixed uses, and lighting of the exterior. We now broke down image and milieu into ownership and maintenance culture. Just go to the next slide. Let's see. So in the first case study, which was a case study of the 1,000 housing estate in Maiduguri along Airport Road, it is found out here that under territoriality, the fencing was poor, landscaping was poor or almost non-existent, and mixed uses here was also very poor. Next slide. In a similar case study in the 777 housing estate in Maiduguri, Borno, we had similar problems here. Landscaping was also poor. That means generally there's very little attention paid to landscaping, which is an integral part of the defensible space theory. The other two case studies were the Five Oaks mini neighborhood in Dayton, Ohio, and the Clason Point project in South Bronx, New York City. These were already studied by architect Oscar Newman, and these were the resulting factors. So it seems that clearly in the Five Oaks mini neighborhood, they paid a lot more attention to the aspects of defensible space theory than was paid in Nigeria here. Next slide. In Clason, they had a similar problem of landscaping. Next slide. Interviews were scheduled with the housing estate key informants to determine the facility's reflection of defensible space principles in 2 sessions. The first sessions were with the concierge of the housing estate or their representatives, while the second sessions were with occupants who had been living in this estates for a period of time. Data gotten from the interview was subject to content analysis to understand more in-depth explanation on the already established phenomena, with special regards taken to cultural inclinations of the study area and the design peculiarities. As earlier discussed, territoriality was a missing factor in the case studies 1 and 2, but it was very strong in the case studies 3 and 4, which were the Clason Point project and Dayton, Ohio. Natural surveillance was clearly missing in case study 2, as entry points were not oriented towards the street. Thereby, there were hidden recesses in the design. Next slide, please. Results have shown that image and milieu is a missing factor in the case study 2, and the landscape is almost non-existent, as said. Next. So, what were the framework of design solutions adopted from this research? Basically, when it comes to territoriality, the vulnerabilities we're talking about are trespassing, burglary, and spying. So what are the design solutions that we came up with? Transitional spaces, fences and barricades, low fences and barricades not exceeding 1.2 meters of height, after which you may erect burglary proofing, which allows your neighbor or other residents to see into your compound, but not see into the building. Vegetative barricades, segregation of leisure spaces, segregation of private and public spaces, specifications of burglar proofing, doors and
sorry, Handy.
Yeah, this is to the last presenter. My name is Oka Amogo. First, your theory, you didn't really define what mass housing is, because you're supposed to be talking about defensible space theory for enhanced security, mass housing. So you tell us, what do you mean by mass housing? That's one. And second, you make case studies. You didn't tell us what were the criteria for what informed your choices for case studies. How did you relate those case studies? Are those things mass housing? And what's the definition of mass housing? How does that even relate to what you've just treatized to us? These are my questions.
Okay, I have a question for the second presenter. My name is Chinwe Ubechi. You did some case studies, and in one of the case studies, the 1,000 units housing estate, you said that you said something about fencing and landscaping were not adequate. And in all your other case studies, you said there were a few things you pointed out were not adequate. And my question is this: did you find any correlation between the quality of the estates as they are now and crime? That is, that 1,000 1,000 unit housing estate, is there a prevalence of crime there? If there's a lot of crime there, then your findings of maybe fencing, landscaping, and the rest of that, we can say maybe because there's inadequate fencing or landscaping, it may have led to the crime. There was no connection, so we don't know how, you know, you're drawing your inferences. Thank you.
Those that raised their hands, let me go through them first. You were among them. You did too. Let me just go like this now. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, sir. I want to I'm Bello Temitope. I want to congratulate the two presenters for a successful paper presentation. My question is directly to Architect Irena. If I'm right, please. Irene, thank you. Please, I'm sorry for the wrong pronunciation. Your paper presentation is changing perception of public parks in Makurdi. I don't know if during the paper presentation there's a particular place in the during the prayer, in the view of the paper presentation where government policies are put in place to back up how we maintain or how our parks and gardens are being sustained. Few months ago, I worked with an international researcher from Leeds-Beckchester University, United Kingdom, and I visited some parks and gardens in Lagos with him. And in the course of the study, we visited this Ministry of Parks and Gardens Agency in their state secretariat in Lagos State. And it was so saddening. I won't quote administration now. During one administration in Lagos State, government and they planted trees. You could see well-landscaped streets, avenue in Lagos and environment. But a particular government came, and it's the government that uprooted some of the trees to put bus stops, to put some other elements that were not, other structure that did not even help. You know, we have parks and garden benefits are here to lot, green area benefits and all. So I want to, is there a government policy that will back up this? So that, you know, continuity in government, even government policy, if a government plants, will another government come and uproot and want to put probably a statue or put a dustbin? Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, my question is also for the first presenter on parks in Makurdi. I live in Makurdi, so what she has presented is of specific interest to me. One of the personal perception of mine is the fact that the parks, they are occupied mostly by adolescents, and they go there to drink, and that's the kind of activity that goes on there. I can hardly carry a baby, a child of 2 or 3, and put him or she on a crib and ride to a park the way you see them do in America. Why is it so? What do we need to do to change that? And very recently, a new park came up in Makurdi. I think for a long time now, people stopped going to parks in Makurdi. But very recently, a new park came up, which was designed and implemented by an architect who is actually sitting right here in the hall. And out of nowhere, a very large crowd filled up. Is the largest, most patronized park now in Makurdi. What did he do differently that the other parks did not do? Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
Good morning, everybody. Presenters, thank you very well. I have a question each for you. The first presenter, I just like the last person, in my own modification, in all your presentation, I didn't clearly see, because you highlighted seriously about decadence, how some of them have really decayed. I didn't clearly see the solution you have profiled so that there will be sustainability. For example, the one he had just started now. Be sure in the next 2 years, the crowd will go. Because a lot of things will go down. Nobody will maintain,
issues. Oh, okay, I have 3 parks. One is large, one is of this size, and all of that. I'm just suggesting that that could assist. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mine is not a question for any of the presenters or a comment on the presentations, but an observation on how the hall has been set up.
Presenter, if you are around, please get your flash across. I'm here to know you in person, but let me call the name here. If you are around, please. Haruna Abdul Usman and Kawua Abubakar. Please, if you are in the hall, get your flash across, please. Your comment has been taken care of. We'll try to see what we can do after the, immediately questions and answers is over. As we go for tea break, we'll call the attention to that. Thank you.
Okay. The techies, my slide. Can you pull up the last page? I appreciate the audience, and I went through a lot of effort to put on a thank you page for your attention, and that page was not presented. I want it. Thank you. In answer to your questions, the first one had to do with government policy, and the study found out, interestingly, in Makurdi, that even though the government provided the parks, all the 7 public parks have been leased out to private companies for different time periods. Now, this is a policy drive which is globally accepted. Government have done that to be able to improve the use of these parks, because over time, because people don't use them, they have been abandoned, and the governments, because of the poor economies, are stressed doing other things they see more important. So government policy towards maintaining and sustaining public parks was to, the last slide please, was to lease it out to public individuals. Thank you. That is a nice slide I wanted to use to thank you for your attention. Okay, so I hope I've answered that question on government policy. The question, what did City Bay Park, is from Benue State. City Bay Park is one of the parks that were covered in my study. And during the period of the study, the park was under construction. The park started operation in December 2018, if I'm correct. And during the period of the study, the park was still under construction. So the fact that it's now one of the best parks in Makurdi is not factored in the study, because during the study period it was still under construction. However, the question is, what did the architect do differently? The architect, he addressed common issues that the study has found, like perception of insecurity. If you go to City Bay Park now, it's one of the most well-used parks in Makurdi, because they have addressed issues of insecurity. There's illumination in the park all times. You see people in the parks all times of the day and night. They have addressed issues that this study pointed out. Even though the architect, I didn't liaise with the architect, but looking at how the park was designed, it has addressed a lot of the issues as if he looked at my study. Quality indicators like presence of park attendants, which the study found to be detrimental to the use of parks, which other parks in Makurdi have been found to lack, were addressed in this new park. We have quality indicators like park attendants. We have security variables like lighting, less threatening people in the parks, and the park is so well done that even children have free access in the park. They use the parks. All strata of society use the park because he addressed issues that this study found out to be pertinent to challenging use of parks in Makurdi. And so, over time, it has been, let's believe that the quality set up by this architect will be sustained over time. Thank you. I hope I answered that question. The third had to do with how can parks be sustained? How can them, did I get that properly? The person who asked the question. How can parks be sustained? And I want to think that it's an issue of management. Even though the government has leased out most of the parks in Makurdi and they're being managed by private individuals, there needs to be a synergy between the government and private individuals in maintaining standards and in ensuring that even though those parks are leased and the individuals are making profit out of it, the reason for setting up the parks by the government, which is its use by the people of the state or the lay people in the states, is being sustained, and not the profit angle alone for management. Now, with a suggestion on the quality of the paper, improving the quality of the paper by having more pictures. If you look at the major paper, there are pictures of parks and how they relate to one another. However, my presentation was slated to take only 10 minutes. There was only so much I could have put on the slides. So the suggestion is taken in good faith. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your wonderful constructive criticism and observations. The first question was about mass housing. Mass housing in this particular project here is defined as a large scale or multiple units which are produced by either government individuals or private individuals, usually low cost and affordable. That is mass housing here in this particular instance. Now, another question here was talking about inferences that were in the 1,000 housing estate, where we inferred that crime was happening as a result of those, the lack of those defensible space theory principles. Firstly, this is a theory. It has already been proven. Secondly, if you're familiar with the 1,000 housing estate, you would know that there are 2 police stations around that vicinity. And crime has been reported in this particular areas. Another thing is crime is an act of opportunity. It is when the opportunity presents itself that crime happens. In an area, for example, where there is low lighting, poor illumination, somebody is more likely to be mobbed or robbed in those particular spaces. So crime is an act of opportunity, and in order for you to take out that crime, you have to take out the opportunity. Lastly, what is the difference from what has been done before with regards to defensible space theory and what we're proposing now? Now, what I'm proposing here is an infusion from demography. Demography in this aspect, the socio-cultural influences. Designing up in the northeastern part of Nigeria is very different from designing in the south. Up in the north, our people are used to erecting extremely high walls, not knowing that those walls are sometimes a factor or creating opportunities for such crime. So those are some of the differences between the defensible space theory then and now. We're simply modifying it for better use in the northeastern part of Nigeria. I hope I have answered your questions, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. We want to take the third paper now, living with terrorism. That will be done by please, let's have Sharif Adepoju for the third paper, please.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry, this is my first time presenting a paper, so I might be G3, but please just bear with me. Okay, so what brought about the idea of living with terrorism? Well, it all started, we're on our way to a site in Briningwari. So as we were going by the roadside, we just saw like a village. The whole place was burnt up. So I was now talking to one asked, what do I mean by political objectives? Because we're used to terrorists fighting in the name of Islamist groups, Zionist groups, separatist groups. But the idea about terrorism is that if Boko Haram should come today and say they want an Islamic state, the word state there has defined that the idea of the terrorism is not to propagate their religion, but is to define a boundary. And now, definition of a boundary has taken a political tone. So for you to define a boundary, you can as well say terrorism is the act, or will I say the violent act, to create a nation state. Now, next slide, please. So now we will define ruralism as a Nigerian discourse. Now, the normal idea we have for a rural setting, like a village now, is we are seeing them as impoverished people that lack the basic amenities, they have sparse security. But in actual sense, we are supposed to look at the rural village in this captured in these three pictures. They are mostly Nigerian in nature. They have been ravaged by climate change. Like in the instance now, this is a picture from around the Lake Chad. They've been ravaged by climate change. The Lake Chad basin has contracted, and their security are basically local hunters. Now, having this come together, there are little or no challenge to these terrorists that come with greater firearms that they've collected from the security forces. So in trying to build a rural resilience, we have to try to adapt to the changing external forces in such a way that we'll be able to maintain a favorable living standard for the inhabitants. Now, since the reintroduction of democracy in Nigeria in 1999, we have noticed the government's policies have been targeted towards the urban areas. I mean, we can see how Abuja has developed, Port Harcourt, Lagos. I mean, even our governor in Kaduna State is already doing urban renewal. But what are we doing for the rural areas, I ask you. Now, the climate change has left its footprint in the rural areas. Now, this footprint don't necessarily boils down to climate change and how the weather everywhere is getting hotter. It also involves the dwindling of natural resources, crop resources, animal productions. So we tend to find these radical groups taking advantage of these scarce resources to achieve their political gains. Now, this rural resilience framework, I try to adapt it from an urban resilience framework. If you go online, you see so many literature about urban resilience framework. So I try to con mine out of this. Now, this comprises the capacity of a village to function so that the people working and living in these areas can survive no matter what kind of external, terrorist, or internal stresses that climate change they encounter, and responses which can resist these stresses to improve essential services and structure while supporting adaptation. So now I use this to analyze the situation of Borno State. I'm zeroing in into my case now. We have leadership and strategy, economy and society, health and well-being. So these three categories with 11 factors all in all, I believe are the elements we need to create a resilient rural setting. But trying to analyze what's going on in Borno State, I noticed that individuals are surrounded by deprivation and poverty. Now, these people can be drawn, rightly or wrongly, by their religious leaders, since they are the easiest people that are accessible at the rural level. Now, in the health and well-being, in the health and well-being, the resultant effects of conflicts in Borno State on the access to health system and displacement of citizens from their communities has led to malnutrition and deaths. In the case of the economy and society, we have lots of individuals believing their participation in religious groups are the basic needs for their survival. Now, terrorists have taken advantage of this and started looking at, please, next slide. So I now started looking at our settlements. And one of what I noticed with our villages is that they are dispersed settlements, just like what I saw when I was on my way to Breningwari. You see clusters of villages of just like 100 mud houses. You move again, after about 1 kilometer, you see another cluster. So for that to work, it used to work before because they are generally farmers, so they need to have plenty of land and you have to move before you see the next settlement. But from my research, I think it's no more viable. We have to move into a nucleated pattern of settlement. So what I'm pushing for is a government policy that we look at not only urban renewal but rural renewal, and one of the points I'm looking at is nucleated pattern. But then again, we will ask, how would you move people from what they are used to, that they will tell you, my forefathers have been living like this for 300 years, you just tell me to move. Well, such people, this paper is not directed at them, but we can move to people that are in Baga, in Borno State, who have been driven from their ancestral homes that are now living in IDP camps. The government policies can start from there. We can say, okay, for you to go back to your area, you people have to live like this. In this way, even the government resources will be better managed in trying to secure you people. So our target policy will be started for nucleated settlement. We target for people who are in their IDP camps. Next slide, please. Now, what I tried to do with this slide was to create what we understand by the nuclear settlement, where I grouped people together in that area, then I now have these non-structural concrete boulders around. Now, one of the, how will I put it? One of the ways the terrorists move is they move in groups with government equipment. And the element of surprise that they use, that they come with these big trucks and just roll into the villages. So by the time you see these big trucks coming on, the first thing you want to do is to run away. Now, what these boulders will do is that they make it difficult for trucks to move in. Now, if these trucks are finding it difficult to get into the main town, it gives time for the villagers, one, to run away. Two, it buys time for, okay, if they, maybe there's a close by a military facility close by, it buys time for the military people to come in there. And if the terrorists have been able to get in there and the security forces come close, it will be difficult for them to get out so that the security forces can meet them there. So that's the idea of this. And it also encourages having a hybrid service center. Now, having a nucleated settlement, you also, let's say this is Chibok now, and we have a church there, or we have a mosque there. If the person there is preaching what is not tenable, it's easier for people to know what they are preaching about, rather than having isolated settlements all around and everybody is preaching what he wants to preach and you don't know what he's talking about. You can easily report such people. Next slide, please. Now, this tunneling I adapted from what the Chichu tunnel in Vietnam, of when the Vietnamese were fighting the Allied forces. Now, the idea of tunneling, before it can be adopted, there's strong need for justification for the costing, because it's quite expensive to have these tunnels running around villages. Now, the idea of this tunnel is you have the access of the first access of the tunnel from a village, a cluster village now, and they see people coming. So all people need to do is to get down into the tunnel, seal it up, and make a run for it into their military facilities. And at the depth of where I put it, there you can throw bombs empty to not affect anybody, and gives everybody safe passage to get to safety. Now, in conclusion, I would say this research was carried out with the aim of disclosing if a resilient framework to be utilized in creating a resilient rural design. This research shows that the rural settlement framework produces social and non-social solutions, just like I've stated now. Climate change has triggered a shift in function and form of ruralism. Further research is needed to test and validate that these propositions can be applied to a rural system, because these are all hypotheses. We don't know how far it will work or not. It needs to be tested. Rural structures and forms are social products and cultures of their citizens. The lifestyle and opinions of their citizens was integrated into this rural planning to create a valuable environment. We cannot create this in isolation. We have to engage the end users. Considering this and the effects of climate change, rural settlements need to expand their capacity to improve in order to accommodate new policies, planning, design capability to withstand future demands. Rather than just allow villages and communities to spring up at random, with how we have been over the years, without government supervisions, villages need to be planned and monitored. So as I come to my end, I would like to, there was a quote I saw, which I really enjoyed. Is the wife of John Edwards, the late wife of Senator John Edwards. She said, resilience is accepting our new reality, even if it's less good than the one we have before. We can fight it, we can do nothing but scream about what we have lost. But we can accept that and try to put together something that is good for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can we do better? Let's clap for him, please. We will now take our last presentation, Sustainable Solid Waste Management Strategy for Nigerian Urban Cities by Haruna Abdul Usman and Kawua Abubakar. Please let the presenter come over. Can we clap for him, please, as he comes to the podium?
Good morning, distinguished architects. I'm architect Bashir Abdul Malik, and I'll be presenting on behalf of my colleagues. They are unavoidably absent, Dr. Haruna and architect Serkile Kawua. Next slide, sir. Since I'm actually just going to make a presentation on their behalf, I'll try to be as fast as possible. I'll be concise. We had actually doctored the slideshow. We actually had a synopsis about the whole presentation, the aim of their research, and it gives us a general introduction and overview. It gives us insight into the solid waste management and sustainable development goal. We have the relationship between SDG and waste management and the challenges faced with solid waste management. Then there's what we call the integrated waste management system, the modernized mixtures approach, the conceptual framework of the research, methodology that they employed, the results they found out, and the SWM evaluation, perception, and conclusion. Next slide. Now, this paper discusses achieving sustainability in solid waste management in our cities, which translates to achieving SDG goals by 2030. Now, the driving force for this sustainability in solid waste management are the same drivers for the SDG by year 2030. At least 12 out of the 17 goals are related to the solid waste management. And the research, the paper also highlighted, therefore, that in achieving this SWM in our urban centers, it required conceptualization and an SWM process. Now, it's important for us to know that bulk of the solid waste generated in cities, come from domestic sources, households, and so on. Now, that's why the UN SDG highlighted that waste from domestic sources are barriers to achieving this sustainable development. Unfortunately, there's absence of data. One of the findings in the research, or what the paper seeks to highlight, is there's no concise data or real-time data on the waste generated. Next slide. Now, in conceptualizing this SWM process, there were three discovery identification, which is the integrated sustainable waste management, which recognizes three dimensions in SWM. It recognizes the modernized mixtures approach made up of three criteria of accessibility, feasibility, and sustainability. Now, the conceptual framework of this study identified three basic roles of these waste generators from this household, which is the waste generators, the handlers, and how these waste services are received. Now, the paper used Bauchi as a case study, next slide, as a case study, and where they tried to identify the waste generated per capita, per house, and per day. Now, the results of this waste handling obtained in solid waste were obtained in solid waste storage and separation. Now, another result was that the service recipients obtained that there was need for transfer of this waste based on accurate, reliable data, which is lacking and which is not available. Next slide. We all know, as I've mentioned earlier, that there are actually 12 out of the 17 waste management, 12 out of the 17 sustainable development goals are related to waste management. And of course, over time, we have the public health, environmental concern, resource value, climate change and inclusivity as some of the basic aspects and scope for this. Next slide. When we talk of municipal, we're talking of our urban centers. And we know that one thing again is for us to know that municipal solid waste is an important facet of sustainable development for any country and global initiatives, greatly supporting the prioritization of solid waste management. Next slide. SDG, of course, there are 17. There are 17 goals by SDG, which are a collection of 17 global goals designed the United Nations as a blueprint to achieve and more sustainable future for all, which was inculcated in 2015 at the UN General Assembly. Next slide. These are the 17 goals. These are the goals. Next. And you'll see that there are about 12. Next slide. Okay, about 12 of the goals have been slide. As part of the drivers, there were about 4 drivers that were conceived with this 12 goals, and most of the drivers were, we have the protection of public health, which were affected by the SDG 11.3.11. Here, so with the paper, you'll be able to see a detailed highlight about it. Then we have resource value, and we have a supplementary driver, which we call the inclusivity, as mentioned earlier. These are one of the major drivers for the waste management and sustainable development goal relationship. Next slide. These are just synopses of basically the research that they had carried out. As a key utility service, that we have more than 2 billion people that are currently lacking waste management system in cross-cutting issues that affect and impact various areas of sustainable development in each of the 3 legal and political aspects of this sustainability aspect of this integrated waste management system. Next slide. Now, there's what you also call mixtures approach, where it's approach to water and solid waste infrastructure development, which in particular is relevant to poor developed areas and with poor infrastructure. This approach deviates from both the well-known Western large-scale, high-technological, grid-based systems of waste management, of course, and this is basically applied in many African communities. I'm sure when you get the detailed conference report, you'll see this. Now, the approach refers to the development of medium and large-scale environmental infrastructural systems. Which system? Next slide. It still goes further to give us more details about the MMA. Of course, it's also guided by 3 criteria: accessibility, flexibility, and sustainability of this MMA. Next slide. This is just the graphical representation. If you go online, you will see what this MMA is. It has this flexible concept of having a centralized system and decentralized system, of course, where you now have the mixture of both systems. Next slide, sir. Now, the conceptual framework of this study takes into cognizance the MMA criteria, as we've said. There's the primary phase of the solid waste management system from household to secondary phase, where we have a waste junction, transfer station. Then we have collection, transport, and disposal system. We have the downstream actors, and we have the upstream actors. Primary part is the downstream, the secondary part is the upstream. When we now come from the household, we have the built environment household, waste generation, handling, and service recipient. Then we come down to solid waste management infrastructure, where we have technology, social material, and some other factors such as we have the formal and informal, and we have the rejubilation or rejubilation service providers as well. Sorry. Next slide. The methodology used, we had the qualitative, they had the qualitative and quantitative approach to this study, and the techniques used are indicated. The respondents were here, and the types of data that were collected. We have both qualitative and quantitative data. We had review, observation, focus on group discussions. There were face-to-face interviews, questionnaires were given out, and waste categorizations were used for households as well, which were the quantitative information data got. We used the Environmental Protection Agency, Bauchi State Environmental Protection Agency, and other municipal offices. Of course, with households as well as the researchers were the respondents as well. Next slide. The target population were meant to be about 33,339 households. As of 2014, that was what was used by JEDC. Bauchi Emirate consists of 8 districts, 42 wards, 105 sub-wards. Taking the Bauchi metropolis, we have 8 districts, 13 wards, and 14 sub-wards. These were the sampling frame that were used. Then the sampling technique was a purposive sampling, and we took sub-wards on the streets as well as inner parts of the wards. About 378 households were used for the sampling, with about 20, with a grade group of about 5,000 to 25,000 population. Then there was 95% confidence land and 5% margin error. Next slide. Amounts to 48,808,107.9 kg per day. It's about 53,000 tons, which needs to be treated and disposed of in an environmental friendly and sustainable manner. Now, this information is vital to policymakers, architects, engineers, city planners, and environmentalists, as World City faces enormous environmental challenges, and there's need, of course, to protect the environment. Next slide.
I'm sure all that live in Nigeria.
These cluster issues, they are very germane, and in my own opinion, I wouldn't want any rural setting to be destroyed from their formal and informal setting. Rather, we should bring in something that we reinforce the security issues. Maybe planting trees, maybe doing some kind of technology these days that will enhance the security of the people and persons and animals in those villages. Please, I want you to note that. The second presenter about the refuse and what it has to do with disposal. Some of the statistics, in my own opinion, are not all that correct. I want you to update yourself with data, especially from Lagos State. They have enough information for you to gather if you so wish. However, the technology these days in the last 10-15 years is the renewal of the environment, renewal of the dump sites. If you ask questions and if you observe very well, that of Ojota dump site is something that you could study and bring out some useful materials from that. And the government of Lagos has gone further in separating these refuse materials to the one disposable, non-disposable, reusable, and all those stuff. And the plants are already existing, and some of them have started operations. These are things that we can copy in other parts of the country that will enhance our environment and that will not deplete our zone layers. Thank you very much.
Popular request, the last.
Yeah, my comment is on the solid waste management. The presenter, even though he did a lot of work, he didn't tell us the type of disposal systems. You may have landfill disposal system where you dump the then pour some sand, another layer. These are all types of landfill. Then incineration, burning. Just like if you are going to Lagos, you will see all these, where they are burning this thing. Okay, you are not hearing me well. Okay, I was saying that the type of refuse disposal systems, incineration, burning of refuse. Like in Lagos, you know, you have, as you are entering Lagos, you see all those this being burnt and this, you know. Then there's landfill. Landfill is where you spread the refuse, and then you add sand on it, level it, and then add another refuse, layer of refuse. This, you know, these are all types of this. And then composting. So there are many. Then again, then he talked about transportation. Transportation. I thought he would have told us the type of vehicles, means of transportation. I think it is relevant in the study, because there are ones you squeeze, there are ones you open, this and the thing will start, you know, maybe open tippers, but there are ones, the type of this, you know, these are all. And if you look at some time ago, the Lagos state government, they tried to build, they developed some refuse disposal system, you know, equipment, centralized place. There they will either sorting the refuse there, you know, squeezing, sorting the refuse in I've forgotten that, you know, the places they built it, but eventually it became a quite elephant project. But we need to know some of these things. Please.
Thank you. Please, you respond accordingly to all the questions.
Yeah, all protocols duly observed. I have noted your questions, so I will convey them to the presenters. Though I'll collect your contacts now. Thank you very much, madam. I'll collect your contacts now. So I've highlighted the questions you've asked. So I'll forward to the researchers, please, as I introduced earlier. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the comments. They were quite encouraging. The first question was about our land use system and ideas on how to vary the cluster system and how to maybe network the clusters. Where it has been duly acknowledged, I will look into it because it's a very good idea. Now, about our land use system, when I tried to get my hands on our land use law, and the act, I was able to see the land in the state. All lands in the state belongs to all the lands belong to the state. The governor has jurisdiction over every land, then the local governments over the local areas. But I wasn't able to see anything directly talking about our villages. There was no direct response to it. So that's why I left it a bit open. I'm not really sure of how to address that. Just like I concluded, more work needs to be done because these are all just ideas I try to put on paper. The second question was about my title, Carriers and Continuity in Borno State. Okay, the idea behind the title is Kairos. It comes from a Greek word, meaning the right moment or the right time to take a defining action. So I believe the government's fight against terrorism, I think it has reached a plateau at the moment where I won't really say the military establishments have run out of ideas. It's just that they've gotten to a point that they are overstretched. I mean, they can't go and liberate a certain village and expect them to remain there. They have to move. and when they move, they come and attack them again. So we have this continuous back and forth. So I believe this is a defining moment to try to bring ideas to help the government in trying to end this incessant back and forth. So, and I made it, the continuity there is in response to the living with terrorism, because it seems to have reached a point that we have to live with it. So our future lies in how we are going to live with the terrorism. And opening it to Borno is, I didn't want to be specific about a village or an area because I don't know how this paper will be received. So I left it open into the most hit area in the state, in the country. So I hope I was able to answer that. Then the third question was about the lack of response, that the major problem we have is the lack of response. Well, madam, I won't really say the government isn't doing enough. At least I've been opportune to work in a number of rural areas. At least I can say I've worked in about 4 local governments in Kaduna State, and I've worked in villages that you will not even, if I show you pictures here, you'll be wondering whether human beings live there. I will give example of Goronduse. Now, to get to Goronduse from Briningwari main town, you need to take a bike ride of about 3 hours. Yes, and we actually had a site there to walk. Now, this place is so remote that we can't even go and buy wood. It's from the forest there, we cut the wood, plane it in the forest, and build with it in the forest. These people have to go to school. So we usually ask ourselves questions like, if there's a problem here now, and we're even able to reach Kaduna State, let's even have the governor's number, let's call him, okay, there's a problem here. How will he get to meet us? The roads there are not motorable. And these are people living there. And we cannot say, okay, because they are inaccessible, we can't think about them. So in reference back to, this in relation to the 5th question, about saying we shouldn't disturb the system we have in place. From my own direct experience, I think the system needs to be disturbed, sir. Because we cannot leave these people in these areas. This is a place in Kaduna that you will see free-range antelopes, and people are living there. We can't say these people should live close in these areas. We have reached a point where we have to take hard decisions. Should these people remain there, or should we move them away from there if we want to have a good response to when they call for help? And the last question also talk about maybe bringing something to reinforce the system. It's also a good idea, which I will also look into. I appreciate the comment also. Thank you very much.
Please, can we clap for all our presenters? Let's appreciate them for the wonderful jobs they have done. We'll bring this session to a close and go for our tea break. While we do that, we will encourage all the presenters for the next session, the afternoon session, to please make their information available to the media people on time, so that when we come, we won't have any delay any longer. So please, thank you so much for your time and that kind attention. The session has come to a close for now. We'll go for a tea break and come back at 1:30.
You know, it's equally the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Education. Give him another round of applause.
Kind School A, Federal Polytechnic, Bauchi. We are going to start with architectural graphics. I hope you are all undergraduates here. You said no postgraduate students should take part because we said these questions for undergraduates, polytechnic students. It will be too easy for postgraduate students. So I hope there's no postgraduate students seated here. Hope not. You have from 1 to 18. Choose any number and the questions will be given to me to call.
Question number 15.
Question number 15. Please listen carefully. In professional drawings, name 3 types of metric projections you know that reflects 3-dimensional appearance. In professional drawings, name any 3 types of metric projections you know that reflect 3-dimensional appearance. Your time starts now.
Isometric drawing, isometry,
You said isometric and what?
Isometry, A-Z-O-M-E-T-R-I-C.
A-Z-O,
isometry.
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 I'm listening. I said 3. 3.
Good morning, distinguished colleagues. Please, can we have about 10 seconds to go? The plenary session, please. If you are still outside, please come in quickly. We want to start the plenary session, please.
Time up. I'm going to give you 1 point. Ladoke Akintola University, can you please complete it for us as bonus?
Isometric.
Ladoke, are you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Isometric, oblique, and isometric.
You've gotten it. You got the oblique. The oblique is 1 point. Question number 1. What is an acute angle? What is an acute angle? Your time starts now.
An acute angle is an angle less than 90 degrees.
3 points. University of Nigeria. Please speak up.
Question 6.
You said question 6.
Fundamental observation.
University of Nigeria. What is an equilateral triangle? What is an equilateral triangle? Your time starts now.
An equilateral triangle is a triangle that has all its size and its angle equal.
3 points. University of Uyo.
Yes, sir.
Your question, choose it.
Number 2.
What is a gradient? Your time starts now. difference in slope. The change in slope. Change in slope will be undulating. An undulating plane is also changing slope. We still have up to 15 seconds. Change in slope of an elevating plane. Keep trying until the time passes. Okay, keep trying. Your time is up, but I'll give you 1 point. 1 point. Can Cross River University do justice to that? There's still 1 point. Thank you. Cross River University of Technology. Okay, thank you. No? Let me just read the answer. He was very close. He could have gotten everything. Is the degree to which the ground slopes. Please clap for me. Cross River University of Technology, your question. Question number 12. You can see it's a fellow that is speaking the question, so be careful, don't challenge.
Good morning,
the compasses are basically used for drawing circles and arcs. Apart from the common types available for ordinary use, there are 2 special types available for purely professional work. Name them. Name 2 types of compasses. Your time. Your time is running out.
Navigation compass.
I read, which is around.
I say you've gotten it. Your time is running out.
Navigation compass and a protractor.
With what?
You
say what?
A protractor.
No.
And there's some changing the perspective, the perception of public acts. Acts we are talking to the discussion this morning. So please pay attention, get your pieces of paper, and write whatever you can write. And at the end, we shall questions to be directed accordingly. Thank you.
Time up. Mina, bonus. Mina, can you please speak the bonus?
Transverse and zero.
What?
Transverse.
No. The answer before me here says beam compass and spring bow compasses. Please clap for me. The beam compass is for drawing larger circles, while the spring bow compasses is used for accurate and fine work. I didn't set this question. Mina. Windows are generally classified according to their mode of operating. Mention any 4 types of windows used in buildings. Any 4 types. Your time starts now.
Casement window, pivot window, sliding window, and dormer.
You said casement window, you said sliding window. Which again?
Casement window, sliding window, pivot window, and dormer window.
And what?
Doma. Doma.
What is Doma? I don't know what is Doma.
Doma is actually.
You are arguing. Go to. You have so many types of windows. No? Casement correct, pivot correct, sliding correct. But you know the rules here. If you don't get it completely, I give you 1 point. 1 point. 3 were correct. Show me the next one to get the bonus. The start for them is
Doma window, right? Any window can be Doma. You get my point. Doma is just the position. So you can even put a loop at there.
There's still bonus. Don't let this thing. Hello, please. Do not argue with me, please. Please. Let's pick it up as bonus.
Bonus. Alright. You have the sliding window. You have the casement window. You have the pivot projecting window.
How many did you mention now? Start again.
Sliding.
Okay.
Casement. Pivoted. Projecting.
You said sliding, you said pivoted, you said what again?
Casement.
You said and what?
And the projecting.
Okay, correct. Now I'm going to read the window types here. There are so many, but the person who set it. Hello, please drop your hands. I don't have that time. If you challenge, I will remove the 1 point. I didn't set this question. The person who set this question is a certified lecturer. So please. Everybody has gone round? Yes. Now you still need to go one more round. Okay, Esut. Okay, sorry, Esut. I don't know why I'm forgetting you people. Please choose your question. Choose your question. 4. Is 4 available? Okay. Question number 4. I hope you guys are not too close. I hope you guys are not too close to me.
No. Listen to me. No.
I hope you are not. You have to shift back, please. Cameraman, thank you. I know you are doing your work. Okay, the examiner put it here. Even though I seem to personally have problem with it, but I have to read it. What do you mean on that graphic? What do we mean when we say somebody is photogenic?
The person who is photogenic person is the person who is capable of appearing the person who can reflect the basic functions of a photography, which involves showing the parts that are quite essential without the formation of any which can the person who can satisfactorily fulfill the basic elements of photography.
Factoring to pictorial or appearance, or whose pictorial appearance brings out the satisfaction.
3 points. 3 points. It means that the person is always looking attractive.
We have 60 by 45 degrees S squared, and we have 60 by 30 degrees S squared, and we have 45 by 45 degrees S squared. And come again, 45 by 45, 60 by 30, and 30 by 60.
The timekeeper has not asked me to stop you.
45 by 45. 30 by 30 degrees.
Your time of 1 point.
45 by 45 degrees set square, 30 by 60, and the adjustable set square.
Correct. When one you use every day. You overlooked it. You see, these questions are too simple that they can just fool you. Who is the next one? Okay, you next. Please, if I'm reading for your school and you know you're going to get the bonus, you didn't fail it, listen to the question. I may not read it again. We don't have time. The next school, in case you next misses it, you know the next school. So listen carefully. Please pick your question.
Question 3.
Question 3. That's question 3. I hope you're not seeing me.
The contour line is a line on the side that shows the elevation.
That shows what?
That shows the elevation of the site at that point, along the line, the elevation of the site along the line.
The imaginary line that delineates the elevation of different points of the site. Imaginary lines that delineate the different elevations of points on the site.
It's stated here, but not exactly the way it is stated here. That's why I had to consult the film. It is, say, imaginary line, which is correct. Joining points that are above sea level.
Pick your number.
Number 7.
Number 7. Is that number 7? It's a simple one. I know you get it. What is anthropometry? Simple. Even for
Anthropometry shows the dimensions of an item.
It shows what?
The dimensions of an item.
What is anthropometry? What is anthropometry? It's just like asking what is biology.
It's what is again?
Anthropometry. What is anthropometry?
Anthropometry is a drawing that shows the dimension or spatial of a particular shape or size of something.
There's something I'm waiting to hear.
Spatial analysis of an item.
Something is missing. Once you get that thing, even if you don't get it.
Spatial analysis of an architectural element.
Time up. Who gets it?
Human and space. Anthropometry is the spatial analysis of a space in relation to human body size.
One word is missing. One word. Very vital. Oh, that's the key thing. And that's the key thing.
It's just part that wrote it here.
And its activities in relation to human body size and human activity.
Still right now. Keep trying.
With dimensions.
Next. After this.
Anthropometry means human measurement.
Is what?
Human measurement.
Of the human body. That's the human.
Measurement, human body.
These are the key words. Please, record her name for me. Who's next? Who's next?
Let the president collect.
Rutec. Who picked the bonus first?
You need to be now asking questions.
Rutec, no, it's bonus they missed. Is it not bonus they missed? Okay, so your turn. 6 is gone. 9. Yes, 9. That's 9. Please note, if I go to, nobody gets it, I'll throw it to the audience. Please listen carefully. It's biographies. Pencil points are usually sharpened to represent any of the 3 commonly used points depending on the nature of the job and the grade of the pencil. Now the question. Name the 3 common types of points. Apparently enough. That's the main question. The other statement is a guide.
Thank you.
Name the 3 common types of points. Your time starts now.
Exploring the elements of the defensible space theory
1.0
for enhanced security in the
Time is still on low.
settlement.
Point 2, point 4, and point 6.
No.
We call architects and
Pardon?
Is it the things on the grades of the pencil?
You're asking me? You're this man. Want me to tell you the answer? I even guided you. I read the question, the guide, and then I read the question. I told you that's the question. Every other thing is a guide. I can't give you any other guide. That's the guide the examiner. Within your time frame, I'll read. Within your time frame. Pencil points are usually sharpened to represent any of the 3 commonly used points, depending on the nature. Sorry, the time. Because you asked me to read within your time frame. Bonus goes to foot mina. Foot mina.
Dot, dash, and line.
No.
Still have time.
Please don't tell them. I've already given them guidelines. Just keep quiet. 30 seconds. Time up next. Next suit, please. If you don't get it, I'll throw it to the audience.
The round point, the conical sharp point, and the flat
For the rest of Nigeria, have triangular, the corner, and the square.
The what?
The triangular, the corner, and oval, and the corner.
My name is Kunde Emmanuel, the rest of Nigeria. Well, the wedge, well, the little point, how the round.
You said wedge?
Yes, little
What
point.
again?
Little point.
Little point, yes, what again?
And the round.
Well, I will please take his name. Please clap for him. Now, I'll just read this so that one of the main essences of this is for us. Common with hard pencils. The other type, you have the normal point for casual work. Common with medium, hard, and soft pencils. Then you have the wedge point, used by carpenters and for sketch work, common with soft pencils. Please clap for me now. Is that the last one? Have you all gone? Foot mina is this foot mina? 14. That's your 14. Okay. Still on pencil. The wooden pencil has 3 common types of cross sections. Mention the 3 types. I'll read again before they start the time. The wooden pencil has 3 common types of cross sections. Mention the 3 types. I will read the question again. Time has started. 5 seconds off. Instead of discussing, why don't you start saying what you're discussing? Okay, correct. I'm here. See your time.
Okay. We have the round or the circular section or the round section, the triangular section, and then we have the rectangular section. Round section, triangular section, and square section.
2 of them are 2 are correct out of the 3. So 1 is still.
Round section, triangular section, and hexagonal section.
Please give her a round of applause. hexagonal cross section, which is most popular section. She got her 3 points. Answer, please. You have question 8, question 13, question 16, question 17, and 18 still available. That's it. Okay, it seems to be a pencil work. Pencil leads are available in 19 graphite grades, which were broadly classified into 3 groups: hard, medium, and soft. Measure any 4 grades in the medium group. The question has guided you enough. Do I read it again one more time? Did you all get the question? Okay, they all said they got the question. So please, the time. The what?
H pencil, HB, and B
Please come again. You said the what? H, what did you say?
2 H pencil, HB, and 2 B pencil. Lead.
You got into
2H, 2B, and HB.
You said
2H, 2B, and HB. 2H, HB, and B. BH, HB, and B.
You got it. You got it before the last one. You got it before the last one. Medium. Because initially you were saying 2B, that's why I refused to give it to you. 2B belongs to soft. So the moment you now say B, that's why I now said they should give it to you. So, but I'll go into details because this is a learning process so that we all also understand. Within, we have hard pencil, you have 9H to 4H as hard. Medium, you have 3H to H, which means from 3H to major things we are doing here is also to educate you. Please, they have the 3 points, isn't it? A round of applause for them once again. I think that's finished. Now we come to the end of the first round. We left some questions in case there is a tie. Everybody has had 2 questions, isn't it? Now please, read everything as fast as possible. Have you got that? So, the person recording is going to measure your positions for you now. So avoid conflict at the end of the day.
Okay. For A, they have 4 points.
A is Federal Polytechnic Bauchi, 4 points.
For B, they have 5 points.
B is Ladoke Akintola University.
For C, that's UNEC, they have 7 points. For D, UNU, they have 2 points. For E, Prutech, they have 0.
It's not as if they have no points. Please. Correct yourself, please.
No points yet. Yes. Okay. For F, foot winner, they have 4 points. For G, which is Esut, they have 7 points.
So we move to the next one. NIA Akon. NIA Akons. We'll start in the same order. So, Federal Polytechnic Bauchi, you are A, isn't it? Pick your question from 1 to 18. Question 4. Question what? 4. Please, let's be fast. I don't have to I want to listen. I told the guy also that we don't spend too much time on this one. Audience, please, you can move closer. It's only on the front seat you cannot sit on. Every other seat you can, please. Thank you. I want to read your question. Please listen carefully. Who is the first African president of CAA? You know what is CAA? The Commonwealth. They say they don't know it, so bonus to B. Ladoke Akintola University. You don't know it. Thank you for your generosity. One more from here before I go to United. No? Nigeria. From Nigerian Institute of Architects. His name is late architect Oluwole Olumuyiwa. He was born May 29 and died 1999. He was buried on Thursday, 15 July 1999 at the Ikoyi Cemetery. Also, at the time he died, he still had his wife and 4 girls. Ibun, Eniton, Adeola, and Fadeke. Sorry, you chose the question yourself. That was a tough one. Lautech. Question number 1. Please, if you just know you don't know the answer, just the way they did, I'm quite impressed with what they did. We don't know it, so I don't kill out. Okay? Thank you. Question number 1. You remember we're using the envelope numbering. The NIA produced the first African president of the International Union of Architects. What is his name? Your time has started now. If you don't get it, I'll keep quiet. If you get it, I'll call for a round of applause. Keep guessing. The architect told you never paid. You still have time. Hey, please. The Olutusin. What? Olutusin. Architect Olutusin. Olutusin. Martin, could you be SB9? Please give him a round of applause. Okay, I'll read it. 1983 to 1985 of the Institute. He served as president of IUA from 1990 to 1993. From June 1990 to June 1993. He is the principal partner of Femi Majekodomi Associates, a firm of chartered architects with offices at 52 Odolana Street, Lagos Island, Lagos. I hope his office is still there. He obtained diploma in architecture from the College of Art, now Kingston Polytechnic, Kingston, England in 1967. He was fully registered by ACON on 24 April 1970 with registration number F36. Give a round of applause. He's still alive. Unique. Question 11. This is NIA on the hand. up NIGERIAN. Is that your question? 11? Okay. When you leave school, listen carefully, when you leave school, you'll be confronted with Nigerian Institute of Architects Professional Practice Examination. How many times a year is this examination organized? Give a particular month of the year for the examination. Even if you get the current one or the former one, we'll give it to you.
2 times. 2 times. April and September.
Alright, he missed the former and the current, but the question already says we can give it if they use the current or the former traditional. In September is the traditional one. The April is the one they're using now. But in the past, it used to be March. But currently now they're using April. So before you answer, we already said if they get the former and the present, we'll give it. So, fellow, do I go ahead and give the point? So the fellows are giving. But I'm going to read. Okay, there's no need. Verse 6. As president of the NIA. Now the question did not stop there. Okay. Name any 2 past presidents of the NIA who are not practicing in the southeast of Nigeria.
Architects, Doing Oliver Bray.
Go ahead. No, you said it 2. You said 2. Please clap for me. There's a long list. So once I get any 2.
Yes.
This one, are you elected president of NIA residing outside Lagos? That's not what I have here. Audience. Wow. You are an architect. Are you an architect or student?
No, student, sir.
Please give a round of applause.
I'm Busali University, sir.
Are you serious? Okay. He is Vivian. He died recently. Recently in Benin, I think. Okay, maybe that's why she got it. Maybe that's why she got it. He resides. Well, he was residing in Benin, where he had his practice, Vivian Uku and Associates. He was a fellow of the Institute with number F12. He graduated from Sheffield, England in 1957 with diploma in architecture. He was registered by ACON on 30th January 1970. His ACON number is F6. So probably the number 6 architect registered in Nigeria. Well, they say the first. The question says the first. That's why I didn't give you that's why I didn't give it to you. Because other presidents after him, Frank Kumbanefo and Adukun, are from Enugu and Kaduna respectively. The question says first. That's why I didn't give you. Kumbanefo would have been correct if the question didn't say first, so don't protest. Thank you. So put me now. Put me now. That's your 18. Give her a uniform. But they didn't give me power to give score for uniform. Okay, very simple. Who is the current president of ACON? Walk over.
At the front,
Frank Adibejo. Which Adibejo? This one or another one? I said ACON president.
ACON president. Correct. ACON president.
Remove that cap for her,
Alright.
No, this time is not up. Talk if you want to talk.
Time is up.
Your time is up, I can't.
Joko Ajayi.
Joko Ajayi? Why you laughing now? Please, order. Come again.
Architect Gabriel Ajayi Oladipo.
Okay, please clap for me. Please, how somebody is recording the names of those who are outside. President, yes, someone recording those. But this is good. What is the highest political office an architect has ever occupied in Nigeria? Give the name of the first architect who achieved this feat. There are two questions. I hope you got it. Your time starts now.
Vice President of Nigeria. That is Architect Alex.
Correct. 3 points. The political office is the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria from 1978 to 1983. So Alex Ifeanyi Chukwu Ekweme late. He died recently. He was a fellow and past president of the institute. He was the principal partner of Ekweme Associates. It was the largest architectural firm in the mid-70s. Architect Ekweme was from Oku in Anambra State. Are you from Anambra? Okay. Next. Okay. Bauchi, your second question. Bauchi, number 7.
They don't pick.
Which category of membership does the Code of Professional Conduct of the Nigerian Institute of Architects apply? Which category of membership does the Code of the NIA apply? Your time. What categories of membership does the Code of Professional Conduct of NIA apply? And what category of membership does the code apply? You know your time is going already, 15 seconds. It's a very easy question. Just look at the question very well, you'll be able to answer it.
Registered architect.
What?
Registered architect. Full member.
Once you get it, I will call for a round of applause.
Associate member. Associate member. Full member.
If somebody has even, I was waiting for you because you were mentioned, if you have mentioned all, if you have even mentioned all of them by name and they were complete, I would have still given it to you. But you mentioned 3 categories, technologies and the others, you left them out. It's not allowed. Thank you.
Okay, pick your question.
We're in the last round of this phase.
Pick your question,
Pick your question. Question 5. Please, pick quick. Question 5. Please, when we say pick your question, please do so quickly. You already know the next people will be getting ready. That's 5. When was the Umbrella Association for Students of Architecture in Nigeria formed? Which institution first hosted the association's secretariat? This is last question. 90 what?
1985. Apple.
Apple?
Yes.
Is it Apple Michael?
Ahmadu Bello University. Design.
You said 90 what?
85.
Not a bad deal. Not expected. Give him 1 point.